Today, I'm giving you the full book, broken into 10 lessons that cover everything from this book, not just the famous ones. Lesson 7 covers something almost nobody talks about when they summarize this book, the actual history of taxes, so make sure you stay for that one. Lesson 1, 2 Dads, 2 Mindsets. Before Kiyosaki teaches any financial concept, he sets up the contrast that defines the entire book. His poor dad would say, "I can't afford that." His rich dad would ask, "How can I afford that?" That single shift in language might sound small, but Kiyosaki argues it represents 2 completely different relationships with money and possibility. "I can't afford it" closes the door immediately. It ends the thinking process. There's nothing left to solve, so the brain stops looking for solutions. "How can I afford it" does the opposite. It forces the brain to start problem solving, looking for new income, new opportunities, new ways to make something work. Both of Kiyosaki's fathers were intelligent, hardworking, and successful in their own way, and both loved him and wanted to give him good advice. But because their core beliefs about money were opposite, Kiyosaki realized he could grow up comparing both philosophies side by side rather than blindly accepting either one. That's the entire premise of the book, not which dad was right, but what we can learn by examining both mindsets honestly. Lesson 2. The rich don't work for money. When Kiyosaki was 9 years old, he and his friend Mike wanted to learn how to get rich, so Mike's father agreed to teach them, but not in a classroom. He offered to pay them 10 cents an hour to work at one of his stores. After weeks of boring, low-paid work, Robert got frustrated and wanted to quit. That frustration was exactly the lesson. Rich Dad explained that most people spend their entire lives angry at their boss or their paycheck, but trapped in the same cycle anyway, because fear and the need for security keep them showing up for a wage rather than looking for a way out. He compared it to a donkey chasing a carrot dangled in front of it, always one step away, never satisfied, never stopping to look at the bigger picture. The lesson isn't that having a job is bad. It's that working only for a paycheck, without ever building something that pays you independent of your hours worked, keeps you permanently one step behind. Robert and Mike eventually applied this lesson themselves. They noticed a convenience store throwing away unsold comic books, asked to keep them, and opened a small comic book library in Robert's basement, charging neighborhood kids a small fee to read as many as they wanted. It was a tiny business, but it was their first real taste of money working for them instead of the other way around. Lesson 3. Why teach financial literacy? This is the core of the entire book, the idea everything else builds on. Kiyosaki's poor dad was one of the most educated men he knew. Yet he struggled financially his whole life, because school taught him how to be a good employee, not how money actually works. Financial literacy starts with one simple distinction. An asset puts money into your pocket, and a liability takes money out. That's the entire test. Stocks that pay dividends, rental property that generates income, businesses that run without you, these are assets. Most of what people think of as wealth, an expensive car, a big house with a large mortgage, designer clothes, are liabilities because they cost money every month without returning any. Kiyosaki illustrates this with simple cash flow diagrams comparing the poor, the middle class, and the rich. The poor spend their income on basic expenses. The middle class earns more, but spends it just as fast on liabilities they mistake for assets, bigger houses, nicer cars, more debt. The rich direct their income into the asset column first, and let those assets eventually pay for their lifestyle. The shape of someone's cash flow, not the size of their paycheck, is what actually determines their financial future. Lesson 4. Your house is not an asset. This is the single most controversial idea in the entire book, and when Kiyosaki first tried to publish it in 1997, multiple publishers rejected the manuscript specifically because of this chapter. At the time, almost everyone believed their home was their biggest investment. Kiyosaki's argument is simple. If you live in your house and pay a mortgage on it, it takes money out of your pocket every single month, mortgage payments, property tax, maintenance, insurance, while giving you zero income in return. That makes it a liability by his own definition, no matter how much the house might appreciate over time. Appreciation isn't the same as cash flow, and cash flow is what actually builds financial freedom. This idea looked almost reckless to critics for years, until the 2007 housing market crash, when borrowers across the country discovered that a home's value could fall just as easily as it could rise, and that owning a house didn't guarantee wealth the way they'd assumed. Kiyosaki isn't telling you never to own a home. He's telling you to stop counting it as the centerpiece of your financial plan and to focus on building real income-generating assets instead, separate from wherever you happen to live. Lesson 5. Mind your own business. There's a difference between your profession and your business, and most people never separate the two. Your profession is what you do to earn a paycheck. Your business is your asset column, the things you own that generate income whether or not you show up to work that day. Kiyosaki's advice is to keep your day job if you need the stability, but stop pouring 100% of your energy only into your profession. While you're employed, build your asset column quietly on the side. He also follows a controversial habit here: paying yourself first. Most financial advisors will tell you to pay your bills and creditors before anything else. Kiyosaki does the opposite, investing a fixed amount into assets before paying a single bill. His reasoning is that this creates pressure, the same way physical resistance at the gym builds muscle. When the bill collectors call because you paid yourself first and now have less left over, that pressure forces you to get creative, find new income, and solve the problem, rather than comfortably paying bills first and having nothing left to invest. It's a risky habit if used carelessly, but it illustrates his bigger point. Build your business in the background, no matter what your job title says you do during the day. Lesson 6. The history of taxes and the power of corporations. This chapter rarely makes it into short summaries, but it's one of the most practical lessons in the whole book. Kiyosaki walks through how income tax was originally introduced and how it was sold to the public as something that would only ever apply to the rich. Over time, that promise quietly expanded until it applied to nearly everyone. The bigger lesson is about corporations. Kiyosaki explains that the rich often earn, spend, and then pay taxes on whatever's left, structuring their spending through a corporation, while employees earn, get taxed immediately, and then spend whatever remains. That ordering, earn spend pay tax versus earn pay tax spend, is one of the quiet structural advantages available to people who understand how corporations and legal financial structures work. This isn't a call to do anything illegal or to feel resentment toward wealthy people for using these advantages. Kiyosaki's point is the opposite. Financial education includes understanding the legal tools available to you, like business structures, tax law, and corporations, instead of assuming none of it applies to someone who isn't already rich. The people who benefit most from these tools are usually the people who took the time to learn how they work. Lesson 7. The rich invent money. Kiyosaki argues that real wealth isn't about how much money you already have. It's about your ability to spot an opportunity and create value where other people see nothing. He calls this inventing money, using financial intelligence, creativity, and a willingness to take calculated risks to generate income out of situations most people would walk right past. This is where financial IQ becomes more important than formal intelligence. Two people can look at the exact same situation, a piece of undervalued property, a business problem nobody's solved yet, a market inefficiency, and one person sees nothing while the other sees an opportunity, simply because they've trained themselves to look for it. Kiyosaki is clear that this requires courage as much as knowledge. Most opportunities come with some risk attached, and people who wait for a perfectly safe, guaranteed opportunity often wait their entire lives, because that opportunity rarely exists. The willingness to make offers, take calculated risks, and act on an idea before it feels completely safe is, in his view, one of the most underrated skills separating the wealthy from everyone else. Lesson 8. Work to learn, don't work for money. Most people choose a job based on salary alone. Kiyosaki argues this is often a mistake, especially early in your career. He advises choosing jobs and experiences that teach you valuable, transferable skills, even if the pay is lower, because real-world experience tends to be a better teacher than any classroom. His own career reflects this directly. He worked on a ship for Standard Oil, learning about international trade. He joined the Marines to build leadership skills. He then took a sales job at Xerox, deliberately choosing it because he was naturally shy and knew sales would force him to overcome that, eventually becoming one of their top salespeople. None of these jobs were chosen purely for the paycheck. Each was chosen for the skill it would build. He specifically highlights sales, marketing, and communication as foundational skills for almost any future success, business or otherwise, and warns against over-specializing too early. The education system pushes people to specialize in one narrow lane, which can actually make someone more vulnerable, not less, when that specific industry or skill becomes less relevant. Knowing a little about many things, and being willing to learn constantly, builds the kind of flexibility that a single specialized skill set often can't. Lesson 9. Overcoming the 5 obstacles. Kiyosaki names 5 specific obstacles that keep people financially stuck even after they understand everything covered so far. Fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, and arrogance. Fear of losing money keeps people from ever investing or taking the first risk. Cynicism, doubt dressed up as logic, talks people out of opportunities before they even try. Laziness disguises itself as being busy with other things, an excuse to avoid doing the uncomfortable work of learning something new. Bad habits, particularly around spending, quietly undo any financial progress before it can compound into something real. And arrogance, the belief that what you don't know doesn't matter, is the most expensive obstacle of all, because it stops people from seeking new knowledge the moment they feel even slightly successful. Kiyosaki is honest that he personally struggled with several of these, arrogance especially, and that it cost him real money over the years. His advice isn't to eliminate fear or doubt completely, since some caution is healthy, but to recognize these patterns when they show up and refuse to let them be the final word on a decision. Lesson 10. Getting started. The final practical chapter of the book is essentially a checklist for turning everything you've just learned into action. Kiyosaki lists steps like finding a deep, personal reason you actually want wealth, not a vague, I want to be rich, but something specific enough to keep you motivated when it gets hard, continually educating yourself financially, paying yourself first, choosing your friends and mentors carefully, and most importantly, simply starting, even in a small way. He's upfront that none of the ideas in this book matter if they stay theoretical. The comic book library he and Mike built as 9-year-olds wasn't impressive in size, but it was real, and it taught him more than any classroom could about cash flow, opportunity, and ownership. He argues that small, real action beats big, perfect plans that never leave the page. The book ends not with a guarantee of riches, but with a challenge. Most people already have access to the same information in this book somewhere in their lives, through a mentor, a book, an opportunity they walked past. What separates the people who become wealthy isn't access to better information. It's the willingness to actually use it. So if you remember nothing else from this video, remember this. Being rich isn't about how much you earn, how educated you are, or how smart you sound. It's about understanding the difference between an asset and a liability, having the courage to invent opportunity where others see none, and actually acting on what you learn instead of just collecting information. Kiyosaki's poor dad did everything right by traditional standards and stayed financially stressed his entire life. His rich dad broke nearly every traditional rule and built lasting wealth that outlived him. The difference was never intelligence. It was financial literacy and the willingness to use it. Which of these 10 lessons hit you the hardest? Let me know in the comments.